right, we are recording and we're with Linda D. Addison right now, poetry editor for Space and Time. None of the beautiful poetry in this magazine would be here without this woman right here. So we got on with Linda a little bit today, and she is going to tell us some secrets about how, oh, there you go. I actually have a print of that now. My Kira sent it to me.
Amazing cover.
Yeah, love
All
that.
the covers are fabulous, but this one really, I love that color.
I know, and that was so perfect to go with that lead story, the Leonard Spicer story, and it's about it's about that painting, and the painting's about that. They didn't know each other. It was just synchronicity.
Amazing.
Yeah. So, anyways, tell us about yourself. Everybody knows you, but go ahead and tell us about like how you started with Space and Time, because I actually don't know that because that was before my time with Space and Time.
Well, actually, it's a step back before Space and Time. I was in a writer's workshop at New School in New York, and with Gordon Linsner was in the workshop. And the workshop went on for, however weeks and months it did. But it was so good to get the feedback, the structure, the way it was structured, that when it was over, a bunch of us stood up and said, we want to keep doing this. We were meeting, I think, every other week or something like that. So then me, Gordon, Gerard was in that. That's where I met Gerard Huener, who's the fiction editor. There's a bunch of people in the thing here that were in that workshop. So we decided to keep meeting. So since 1990, I've known Gordon.
Wow.
And in 1999, there was a different poetry editor, and I don't remember what the switchover was, but Gordon asked me if I wanted to do it. And so I started with the spring issue in 2000, number 91. That was the first one. And I'd never really edited. I mean, I don't edit, like I don't rewrite poetry, but I'd never really done that kind of reading before that. But I just loved it. I find it very inspiring to read other people's poetry. So yeah, been with the magazine since 2000. 21 years.
I'm gonna go find that. What issue was that again?
91. I have it in my bookcase somewhere. I mean, I have them all together,
Yeah, yeah.
all together.
I'm
So
gonna go find that one. Did you start with Word Ninja in that one?
I did not. I'm trying to think of when I started Word Ninja. You sure you and I didn't start that?
No, because I was actually in Word Ninja before I even knew what Space and Time magazine was.
Okay, then that
One time.
I'd have to go back and look. I'd like to know myself, because it wasn't that wasn't when I started it.
Yeah.
So I can't remember now. I'd have to look.
I'm gonna go look. I've got boxes. I've got all the back issues from Hildy and Gordon, so I'm gonna go look now.
Me too. I need to put that in my little document. I have a little document of all the things I've published by poetry, fiction, nonfiction, just because I like to remind myself when I wake up one day and I'm empty of words. I like to look at the list and go, but I can do it. I did it.
Well, I'm gonna say it's not a little document then. I'm just gonna guess it's not a little document.
It's gotten longer. But now that I'm doing this archiving, I guess we'll talk about that in a bit. I have been pulling out all these old documents. I literally found a list. I think I only had 6 things in print.
Oh, wow.
And I'm like at 360 now. 364.
Awesome. I mean, since you bring it up, tell us about the archiving, because this is a pretty important, prestigious deal.
Oh, it was crazy. So I had been in conversation and contacted by, I had to write it down because they have a beautiful name and I'm not going to remember it if I don't know. The Pitt University Library System has a horror studies collection. And so they contacted me. We got into conversation about them archiving, adding my papers to their archive, which was like unbelievable.
Like immortality.
That was unbelievable. I still get chills now thinking about it, and I've been trying to get used to it for a while now. So they just announced it in an interview they did with me a couple weeks ago, and the link is on my website also. And I see that you put it up. Thank you.
We did.
Such a big supporter. I appreciate that, of everybody. So the idea is that, I pulled all these bins out of my closet that I've been just keeping old stuff in.
Yeah.
I'm more like a go forward kind of writer. So I'm always thinking about the next thing I'm working on, but I also kind of didn't throw a lot of stuff away either. So the idea of the archive is that, let me just get some water in. I don't know
Mhm.
what's happening. I'm having some allergy situations. So the idea of the archive is for people, the biggest idea is for students and teachers and anyone else, I suppose, to be able to go in and see where a poem started in its original form, edited, and ended up in its final form.
Oh, wow.
So, I mean, yeah, there's a huge sense of immortality there, which I didn't see that coming really. so,
Yeah.
so I've been just going through, I have all the bins out of my closet. I made a joke, it's like my closet's like Doctor Who's thing, because I don't even know how all these bins got in that closet. And I'm just trying to split things into boxes by book,
Yeah.
by book published. But and I made some amazing discoveries that I did not know I had. One of the more popular poems that I've performed, and a video was actually made by a professional group here in Arizona, was Mami Wada, Goddess of Clear Blue.
Okay.
And I found the original yellow paper written and marked up of that poem. I did not even remember ever having that.
Oh, wow. Are they going to actually like scan that or something? So,
I don't know how they handle their archives.
yeah.
I'm looking forward to going because they have George Romero's estate sent all his stuff.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's a lot of cool stuff. I'm
That is
looking
so
forward to
cool.
see. So, yeah, and I've actually, I was telling them how I have all these starter things like pieces of paper, where I write things down all the time in my journals. I'm not even ready to give them my journals. I told my son, you can give them to me when I'm gone, because I still use them for
Yeah.
inspiration. So it's a pretty breathtaking concept.
Yeah. Yeah, that is so cool though. It's like it is such a big concept. When I heard about it, it's like I had to develop it in my brain. Like, what do you mean archive? What that's essentially like having a literary monument built to you. That is flipping awesome. But I can't think of a better person. You know what I mean? You have so much variety and so many things out there. I mean, even beyond this,
Mm.
and that's where I'm leading next. What else have you been doing? I mean, the small stuff, which is all pretty big stuff.
Yeah. You mean what have I got going on that's exciting in the last bit of time?
Yeah, like all the crowns. What are the latest crowns
Oh
you've
my
been putting
gosh,
on?
okay,
We
crowns.
can just cover last year. We don't have all day.
So I have, last year I won my 5th Stoker for The Place of Broken Things,
I love that book.
like weird poetry written with Alessandro Menzetti, which was amazing. We had such a great time writing together. It was wonderful
Yeah.
writing with him. And he's in Italy, I'm here. So we did it all electronically. We only had like about a couple hours. We were both awake at the same time. But we had such a great time doing that book. And I've said this before many times, is that when I finish something, I am so happy with it and joyful. It's like the best thing. And then when I find out other people like it, that's even more better.
Yeah.
Then I get awards for it and I'm like, what? So here's the latest Stoker.
Aw, that's
And
so
in there
pretty.
it has the title of the book, the year, my name.
That is
Alessandra has
so
one
cool.
too. So, okay, so I have 5 of these heavy.
Just your Stoker collection.
Yeah,
Oh, those.
they're called houses. I have a little village. And then the end of last year, I got something that wasn't even on my bucket list, like the archive.
Yeah.
It's made a joke of, who actually thinks that's real. So what wasn't on my bucket list is last year I was made Grand Master. See how magical that is?
I know. That's beautiful.
It's like a magic portal.
Yeah.
I'm made Grand Master by the Science Fiction and Fantasy Poetry Association, which I've been a member of for a long time. And they've only had 8 so far. And Ray Bradbury was one of them. I'm like,
Oh, dang.
what? Because
Yeah.
I've read everything of his that I could get my hands on. So I guess those are the 2 awards. And then this year, okay, I'm just going to keep talking about what's exciting me.
Yeah.
Look at this.
Oh,
I have
wow.
a story in the Black Panther anthology that came out through Marvel. What
That is
in
amazing.
the world are we talking about? And it's a
Yeah.
beautiful book. You can't
Wow,
really,
that is thick. 'Cause I haven't actually gotten one yet. That is a thick book.
and it's the hardcover is like 17 something now on
Oh,
Amazon,
wow.
on Barnes and Nobles and all those things. But it's a beautiful book. Like
Yeah.
the cover has a pattern, the pages of it is like one of the most beautiful things I've ever been in. And I've
And
been
they,
in 50 anthologies so
yeah.
far. And
And you know, because you're sitting there writing it all down now.
yeah, right. And I have a poem that just came out with Weird Tales,
Oh, nice.
which
That's
is
the second one, right? Is that the second one
yeah,
under Mayberry?
under Mayberry.
Okay.
And what's so cool is that this is a poem. If I just want you to see the artwork because
Yeah,
you and I are going to talk about how beautiful you have made Space and Time with artwork.
that is
So,
gorgeous.
this is a poem by Alessandro. And my poem, which was inspired by his, because he wrote his first, is called The Last War. And you see the
Oh, yeah.
so I
He,
think I see them in a frame next to each other. So
yeah, yeah, that's awesome. Especially since you can you put your little houses under them so it matches.
you know, right. So, those are the two biggest things on my desk right now. I got a stack of anthologies that came out last year that I was in. So yeah,
That stuff.
that stuff.
Well, that's one thing I think that's why you're so successful because you say you're a forward thinking writer. That's the point. We don't want to dwell on the stuff that we did because we got to do new stuff. I got dogs yawning over here. I don't know if you can hear all that.
It's adorables.
They're 2 cents in. As a forward thinker, we're always looking to the next issue. You are the gatekeeper of all poetry in space and time.
I am.
How do poets get past you? What is the secret? What sacrifices need to be made?
No, we don't need to do any small animals or anything.
Yeah, no animals.
Oh no.
It's a way to not get in.
Yeah, exactly. Trying to support love, not fear.
Yeah.
Well, you and I have talked about this. I don't know how many people realize that when, first of all, since Space and Time, you have let's just rave about how beautiful each page is. This is for the fiction. And then the poetry is just, it's so graphic and gorgeous. It's literally every page is beautiful. And Weird Tales is doing that too under Jonathan. So I think that has really drawn more people to submitting every 3 months when we submit. So if we get 100 submissions, and I'll talk about the process so people can understand how I pick them. But I'm just going to say number wise, I get 30 that are in my top, and then I have to pick less than 15 to be published, right? Okay, so the way I do it, and I can do this with poetry, I think fiction is a little bit harder, is I read each one out loud, each submission out loud. I don't pay any attention to who's sending it. I don't pay attention, people can send a bio. I don't pay attention to that. To me, it's about the poem. And poetry is very musical to me. So I read it out loud so that I can hear it. As if I bump over a word, an image, then that goes, so I have 3 levels, that in my spreadsheet, I keep like a 1, 2, 3, right? So 1 are like, I didn't bump over anything and I got to chill. I have to have some kind of an emotional feeling, a reaction, a surprise, sadness, joy, something. It has to. So all those go and get a 1. Ones that come close to that get a 2. Ones that I bump over or something really big go into the 3 pile. Now, the thing is that, and this I want to say officially, is that just because I put someone in a 3 pile doesn't mean they won't be a 1 for another person. Because poetry is very personal. So what doesn't resonate in me might resonate highly in someone else. So each poet has to make that decision for themselves. So that's really, for me, how I do it is I read out loud. It doesn't have to be like my poetry, but I like like I said, an image that touches me. You know, sometimes, I mean, we've had poems that are like a few words.
Hmm. Yeah, the haikus, some of those are like the most
They
powerful.
amazing because they do something, you know.
Yeah.
The one that we have, I don't think it's in this one. No, it's in the one that's coming out 140 by Sheila Scheffler, where
Oh, yeah.
it's as simple. Oh, I don't want to say it because I'll say it wrong, but
I actually have it right here.
it's
I'm
a
gonna.
haiku. You read it.
I loved that one because, and it's actually kind of funny and simple, but so powerful. I'll actually hold it up.
Yes,
Is
and
that
okay,
backwards?
no, no. And so
Okay.
the haiku, and it reads, and now Glinda asks, are you a good witch or bad? The answer is yes. Like I
I
just
love
like
that.
reading it. So, you know, I am touched by that kind of thing, like
Mm,
unexpected thing.
and
Or
truth, because we all are good or bad. I mean, we're both. We're good and bad, and that's okay.
yeah, so I mean, I can't say there's one rule. I think if anyone's perplexed by an issue of space and time and read them, because they're all very different in some
Hmm.
way. And I can't predict what's going to touch me. That's why I read them out loud. And like I said, I don't really pay attention to who sends them.
Hmm.
You know, the first one, or first published, or, you know, their millionth. It doesn't matter to me. What matters to me is how I feel when I read the poem. And so all the poems in there, in all the issues that I've picked since 2000, in the 21 years, I've always done that. I've always read them out
Yeah.
loud. And if
Yeah.
I have some kind of change in energy, whether it makes me laugh or makes me sad or whatever, or like you said, you know, highlight some kind of basic truth, it's all kinds of different things, but that's
Yeah.
how I make the decision. And then when I get down to, I mean, it's not that easy to get that last less than 15 poems. It's really hard.
Oh, I know.
Really hard.
I
I mean,
feel the pain when you're sending it back. Like, okay.
it's just, I mean, it's just the hardest thing ever, you know,
Mm,
to say no to a poem that is, and so I try to like let people know if it was like one of the ones I really wanted to pick it, but I could only
yeah.
pick so many. And so how do I make those decisions? It's like the battle of the poems. I read them out loud again and just try to
Yeah.
kind of like balance that in some kind of way. It's not an easy decision at all.
Yeah. Especially when it's not, they're not limited by talent or inspiration or that liminal whatever that makes you love it. It's money. And that sometimes makes me so mad. It is just limited resources.
Yeah,
So,
even if you did the whole magazine as poetry, you're
mm,
still going to have a situation because there's
yeah.
just so many, there's so much wonderful poetry that's being created. So,
Yeah.
you know, if I had to say anything, and I do this when I mentor poets, not to be discouraged if you get rejected. If it's a magazine you really, really, really want, then you
Mm,
just keep hanging at the door with
yeah.
work. If it's
Yeah.
if it's not, you just, no matter what, a rejection, you just send it to the next place,
Yeah.
right? And a story of that I will tell you is that Isaac Asimov's science fiction magazine was a huge reader of Isaac Asimov. And I got to meet him. We got to be like event friends, you know,
Oh,
like there
nice.
weren't that many Black folks showing up at that time. So that was not, I was not hard to recognize. And then we just had sort of a thing talking
Yeah.
about, so, and joking and stuff. So when his magazine first came out, I was like, I have to get published in this some kind of way. So I
Yeah.
just started throwing everything at them. And it wasn't poetry. I was sending stories to them. And I kept getting rejected. As soon as I get rejected, I send that somewhere else and I'd send another one to them.
Mm,
And probably 80% of what they rejected, I published somewhere else.
mm-hmm.
It took more than 10 years before they accepted something from me. And it
Oh,
was
wow. Oh,
So,
wow.
you know, I always tell that story when I'm working with, you know, I'm mentoring someone who's discouraged with a rejection. I tell
Mm-hmm.
them it took me 10 years to get into Isaac Asimov. Now, why did I concentrate on that? Because I really wanted to be in it.
That one. Yeah.
You know, I've been published, like I said, in a lot of places, and they were just like a market that I sent to. So,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and
So
then some
should not
resonate
be at
with
all
us.
discouraged about not getting into space and time, but you make it hard for them because it's so beautiful. And now you're putting the names of the poets on the cover.
Yep.
Everybody gets to see their name on the cover.
Yeah, that was actually we can probably credit Alessandro Manzetti with that change because he had mentioned something, and it was one of those things where you grumble like, "Oh my gosh, I'm trying to get this out." Da, 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 da. You know what? That's a good idea. Let's put all the poets because why can't poets be on the cover? Poets are just as important. It's a smaller piece, but sometimes you can have a whole 5,000, 10,000 word story, and you can say everything in a poem. You know,
Yeah,
not saying one is better than the other. They're
no.
equal. They're two facets that are equally important. So,
Well, there's one big change that you made when you took over, which I also really, really respect and love. And that is that in the table of contents now, you just have the title and the name. You don't say whether it's poetry or not.
mm-hmm,
And I really like that also. I have written poems out of stories I've written.
mm-hmm,
I've written the poem version and I've written poetry to first and then written a story from it.
yeah,
Sold both because you know what? I always joke about this, but that's how I got to over 360. I love seeing my name in print.
yeah,
I will keep sending that thing out. If I can't make it better, I tell people bring it in. If you can make it better, make it better. But
yeah,
anyway, my only advice to anybody who's trying to get work published is read it out loud
mm-hmm,
because you're going to be able to tell like maybe one of the things when I mentor poets, are you using the same word over and over again? I'm not saying this is why people get rejected from space
yeah,
and time.
yeah,
These are tips that I use with mentoring and myself. When I
mm-hmm,
write a first draft, I don't care what it looks like. I just write it to get it out. But then when I rewrite, I use thesauruses a lot because I like to
yeah,
discover new words and use new words.
yeah.
So
And we all have our little words that we use way too much. Like mine is dark. Everything is always dark. There's other words besides dark, and
which is
that's the thesaurus.
which is what you handle and rewrite. You should never
Mm-hmm,
hold yourself back in your first draft. Use
yeah,
everything you want in your first draft to get it out. But when you rewrite is a good time to see whether there are patterns.
mm-hmm,
You do a lot. Again, these are not the things that I reject people for in space.
mm-hmm,
Again, it's just you could use the same word, you could use one word through a whole poem. And if that
yeah.
poem does something to me, then I'm in.
Yeah, yeah, it just depends. And I love that that's what you focus on because that's what makes the poetry in space and time so good, I think, is because you're not going, there's no pattern. It's going to be unexpected, but that's the point because the speculative genre, in my opinion, this is my opinion here, speculative genre is here to shake things up. It's Dune. It's 1984. It's here to have us have bigger thoughts, and it's telling the future as well as telling the past, but melding them into a new possibility. And I think that is the point of it, whether it's horror, fantasy, science fiction, the three are one. And in the poetry in the magazine, you get all spectrums of that, and that's what I think is awesome. You've got humor, you've got like the witch one that we just read, Are You a Good Witch or a Bad Witch, is humorous but also pretty impactful in
I
a
think
haiku, 17 syllables.
I think so too. And I mean, the thing is that, you know, the idea of writing anything, but poetry in particular, I always think of it as like images and emotion,
Mm-hmm.
like the slideshow of writing, and it can be a
Yeah,
long poem, it can be an epic poem with, or it could be a haiku.
yeah,
But you're trying to instill, you want these words to create something in the reader. And
yeah,
that creation is going to be different for each reader because they're reading it from every moment of the life they've lived up into that moment. And everyone's life is different. So a
mhm,
word for one person is going to mean something different for someone else. And I love
yeah,
that. And the concept of speculative, I mean, I've talked about people like, what is speculative poetry? For me, you could have the word star in a poem and not consider that a speculative poem, but it might be a speculative poem because it depends on what the image is that that word is making.
right.
So for me, I'm very loosey-goosey with speculative. Some people are not, but I really am.
Yeah, well, it's very fluid anyways, poetry. How do you even define poetry? think I did a post on that a while back, like what is poetry?
Yeah,
Oh my God, is that opening up a big old can of worms?
it really is. And then there's prose poetry, which,
Yeah,
one of my favorites is Maxwell Gold. I
love
love,
Maxwell Gold.
yeah, he does wonderful prose poetry. I have not written a lot of it. It's not as
Yeah,
easy as it sounds. It's not about writing a paragraph and calling it prose poem,
yeah.
so it's a different animal.
We were actually just talking about that last week about the difference between a prose poem and just say a flash. And we were discussing it, and I said I think it's the difference between like sitting on a bus and you're riding and you see a person and you have an idea of who that person is that by what they're wearing from that flash. If they that's a prose poem. If they get on the bus and you get to observe them for another minute or two between stops and they have a conversation on the phone, you get a bigger picture of who they are. Now you have a little story about them. That's the flash.
Oh,
I
okay.
could be completely wrong, but I always have to make
I
up
like that.
metaphors for simplicity in my mind.
Yeah, I like that. I don't even, I would not have been able to say it that way, but I like that. I
Yeah.
like
Speaking of Maxwell, and speaking of how don't be discouraged by rejection, that story that he has in here, When Gods Die, in this last issue, 140, was rejected last issue. He asked, like, not why, but could you give me any pointers for next time? We looked at it, went over it, made a couple suggestions. You're always welcome to resubmit it. He submitted it with those suggestions. It's in there this time. So
nice.
that is why never be discouraged. Rejections are not
Yep.
reflections of your work.
Nope.
They're just a
It's
moment in
hard not to,
time.
it's hard not to take it personal. I
It
understand
is.
that, and so one of the approaches I've had when I mentor um, writers, young writers, and I mean young in publishing, not age, is, if you say, I'm afraid I'll be rejected if I send this, that's fine. Emotion is fine, but
Mm-hmm.
emotion is not reality.
Yeah.
Reality is your action.
Mm-hmm.
You can still send it even if you're afraid.
Yeah.
So that's what I say. I'm like, you know, whatever thing that you hesitate with, don't self-reject.
Mm-hmm.
Send it, and if it's going to be rejected, then have somewhere else to send it later. And if
Yeah.
you're nervous about it, then be nervous, but still get it out the house.
Yeah.
Send
Yeah.
it out anyway.
At the end of everything, what are you going to regret? That you got rejected? You're probably not even going to remember that, but you will regret that you never sent it.
Exactly. Exactly. So I'm a big believer in no regret. So I'm
Yeah.
all in.
I have on my list tips for hopeful poets, which we've kind of come across. Basically, you said read out loud is a really important one. I personally love your tips. I use them for the performance poetry
Oh,
because
nice.
I suck. I'm a horrible performance poet. And so I have used your list that you sent me tirelessly. Like I go over that. I've shared that with other people. Like you got to, this is where it's at right here. Don't watch me, read what Linda says. Um, what other tips might you have like for like a newbie poet?
Yeah. I'm actually going to be doing, I don't know who's on, oh, I need to bring up my spreadsheet because I can't remember what that thing is called. It's a thing, courthouse. Is it court? No. Oof. It's bad when your memory doesn't work for you.
You know what? If you send it to me, we'll get Ryan to put it up under
Clubhouse. Clubhouse.
Clubhouse.
Yeah, so I'm doing a thing on Clubhouse this weekend where I'm going to talk about the tips for reading out loud. If
Nice.
anyone's on Clubhouse and wants to check it out, um, okay, I'm not going to do this now because it's not going to make sense to do it. But anyway, I can send you the information.
Okay,
But
yeah.
anyway, the reason that, and I've taught this workshop on how to read out loud. Why? Not because I'm so, well, I consider myself a good reader now. But years ago, I used to read whatever I read like this as fast as I could and run off the stage. And then I had gone to readings where I saw people read like Dallas Meyer, AKA Jack Ketchum, or Graham Wilson, or Tom Monteleone. And I was like, wow, they read beautifully. And poets like in New York, Veronica Golas is a huge, is a well-known poet. She's moved to New Mexico, I believe now. Um, so I was like, I didn't like the fact that I sounded like that when I read my work. That's not how I heard it in my head. So I took a class with Dallas. One day changed everything.
Oh, wow.
And then I took a workshop with Veronica Golas, who also changed things for me. And so the list that I sent you is a workshop that I've taught. And like I said, on that thing I mentioned.
Clubhouse, which
You.
is probably linked right here.
Um, this Saturday, I'm going to be doing a thing with them. But anyway, I do it on and off at different things, at different events. The main thing to start with is for poets, but it's the same for poets or for fiction, right? Reading out loud is really important
Mhm.
because you're going to be able to hear. And if you record yourself, that's a good thing too. Some people are hesitant about hearing their voice, but you know what? If you're going to do a reading, other people are going to hear your voice anyway. So
Yeah,
you might as get used to it. So,
yeah. And
and
we
I,
all hate how we sound, I think.
I love my voice. I
Oh,
love your
really?
voice. I
See,
love
I
your voice.
was, yeah.
That's it.
We
You just
don't
got
share that for me.
to listen to your voice some more. The first time I heard myself on a mic, I was on a radio show and I had the head things on. And I'm listening, I was like, ooh, I sound good. So anyway, so it's important to practice whatever you're going to read if you're going to do a reading in front of people.
Yeah,
And to feel those words, to feel each word, to have so that you can read it with the emotion of that feeling. Because no one, like I said, the way I used to read is monotone.
hmm,
No, no one wants to hear that.
yeah,
If you were telling a story to your puppy dog, you wouldn't say, and then they went down the road and they jumped over a fence. You would be like, and then they went down the
yeah,
road, hesitant, you stop and jumped over a fence to make a point.
yeah,
So, and not everyone is so dramatic, but a little bit of inflection can make a huge difference in getting the audience in. So reading out loud,
yeah,
reading the feeling. If you read out loud and you don't feel comfortable, don't do that piece until you are.
yeah,
And the same thing with editing. If you read it out loud and something doesn't connect, that's a place for you to do some rewriting. So practice is really super important. I'm going to add this to my list because I need people to understand. If you have 10 minutes to read, practice time and stop at 9
yeah,
because no one no one wants to be like you have a 15-minute slot and then you read for 25. That's not
hmm,
professional to me.
yeah. It's a disservice to
So
everybody, including yourself.
yeah. So reading out loud is very important. Practicing it is very important. Feeling comfortable with it, listening to yourself. If you can and you have another person or a pet, read in front of them because people, there's an adrenaline that happens when you're talking to other people. And you need to sort of like get yourself used to I'm doing this in front of another person, and you don't need that person to give you feedback, and you don't your
Yeah,
cat dog is not going to give you feedback, but or bird or whatever. But you just want to have the sense of another living being that you're reading to, and
yeah,
looking at eye contact. This is the reading part of the thing. So um and for poetry, when I'm thinking of things I say when I'm mentoring people, it depends on how it is. Form is very important because where it breaks on the line, where you put the commas in, where the stanzas break, are very connected to breath and reading. And even if the person reading it is not reading it out loud, they're reading it in their head. And so you're connecting them into the breath.
yeah,
Sometimes when a poet will write something and it'll be one long, long, long line and then 3 short lines. Unless you need that long line to instill a sense of breathlessness,
hmm,
then that is a place where form probably would serve you and the reader better to break it.
yeah,
So the way to shape it, if you're not trying to write a haiku or a senru or all the zillions of forms that there are, is to read it out loud. And when you have to take a break, that might be where you need to put a comma and a line break.
yeah,
So, there's things like that, you
Yeah, I'll
know.
say for layout too, that's important because when you have that long, long, long line, that is going right over here and it gets lost in the crack of the book or the gutter. You don't want your poems in the gutter.
No, and you and I, we've had a couple of times where the line was super long compared to the rest of the poem, and I've contacted the poet and said, do you have a reason for this line being so much longer? Because if
Yeah,
it doesn't have a purpose, then maybe it's would be worth rethinking that.
yeah,
Because again, it informs the reader as much as the publisher who has to print it.
yeah. And the page is only this big. We're limited by page size and money.
Yeah, so to me, every word, every shape, every comma, every stanza break
Yeah,
means something. And it should mean something. So, that's a lot of what so yeah, if I see something like that and I love the poem, accept the poem,
hmm,
but I will also send a note to the poet and say, is the purpose of this,
yeah,
and so if we have to wrap it because it's longer than the page can print it,
hmm.
let me know that. So
And we'll get really like between us, we'll get very creative to try to fit something in there, like the mermaid one,
oh,
which
yeah,
I
ooh, we
think
could talk
I
about that because you really did the layout on that one.
I think I spent probably 7 or 8 hours on that poem alone, trying to get it to look right. Oh, here it is. I was like, I know I have it. That was too long to fit on the page, but we figured it out. But breaking it up between the two didn't work. It just looked awkward. It was like two separate entities. So we will work with you. Make it easy though.
And I should just mention to anyone watching is that we ask for poems to not be longer than a page.
Hmm.
I mean, that was a particular
Yeah,
project that we both agreed to do for the 2-page one. That is not
yeah.
something we do normally.
No, and it doesn't.
I,
It's hard to work because it's hard
yeah,
to
I
connect
still
those
think
two
poems that
pieces.
are longer than a page. That's why we
Hmm.
decided, you and I talked about changing the guidelines to say not longer than 40 lines.
Hmm.
That doesn't
Yeah,
include blank lines, but because on one computer, depending on the header, footer, font, you might think, okay, this is one page.
right.
But then when I get it, it's a page and a half, and it and doesn't maintain the energy for that length for us.
Hmm.
So that's why we have changed the guidelines to 40 lines.
Yeah, yeah, and that's a really good way to do it too. That was your suggestion because, like you say, if you use a smaller font, yeah, you can fit more on a page, but nobody wants to read that. It's going to be too small. It's not going to look good.
Yeah, yeah. So it's really
So,
important to pay attention to the guidelines, I think, for
yeah.
not just us in general.
Oh yeah. Well, yeah, and that's I would say that is like the number one thing is read the guidelines because there's a lot of stuff that comes in that's beautiful, perfect, but it doesn't fit what we need.
Absolutely.
In
Absolutely.
fiction and poetry and art, because we
Mhm.
do the visual stuff too. So
Yeah.
I want to go back a little bit to the importance of performance,
Mhm.
which I used to read like you. I think my first poem, it was like the page was here and this, it was doing this. I don't know how I
Yeah.
even read it. And I
Yeah.
read it so fast and quiet. And then I was gone. And I think before I even got off that stage, I was saying, I will never do this again. That was terrifying. But if you're writing a poetry or anything really, you have something important to say. And you're doing yourself an injustice by not being able to communicate it properly. And where that really comes and hit me, where I started actually working on it myself, was watching you and Amanda Gorman, who just united everybody with her poem, with that performance. I will say, America is not known for being poetry lovers. I'll just say that. And she united everybody to the point where she was on the Super Bowl reading poetry.
I had tears in my eyes watching her.
Yeah, that was
She
amazing.
used her hands a lot, which I do when I'm reading often.
Hmm.
I was just beside myself. I actually just got the book, just was released of the poem she read at the inauguration. So, I mean, there's a few tips. I didn't think to bring up the document. And you know how you can't find anything when you're looking for it, but there's a few tips. It's like a hit list of things when you actually go to read, right?
Mhm.
First, have something to drink, water. I don't drink alcohol, but if that helps you, then but because again, when you're getting ready to perform, there's an adrenaline rush that you don't think about and it makes you dry.
Mhm.
And then even now, if I was reading a poem, I would stop and take a breath because you get out of breath because of the adrenaline.
Mhm.
Allow yourself to take a deep breath. Never give excuses ever for what you're getting ready to read. Don't say, it's not. No, you can
Mhm.
say, to me, it's more respectful of the work for you to say this was inspired by so and so's passing or whatever. But don't give an excuse in a bad way for the work.
Mhm.
And one of the things, like you just mentioned, read slower. This is why practice helps, and listening. Read slower than you think you could possibly read.
Mhm.
Because you are building an image, like a building in their minds with your work, whether it's poetry or fiction. And if you rush through it, you're not giving your audience enough time to absorb what you're giving them.
Mhm.
So slower is better, louder is better. Um, and like I said, to add some emphasis, like you were telling a story to another person. That's
Mhm.
again why practice helps, because then that draws the audience in. And Dallas was very big with that with me because I used to read monotone.
Mhm.
So that one day we spent a lot of time with him saying, well, what is it that are you trying to make them afraid? Are you trying to entice them? I mean, use some of that.
Yeah.
And, look up at the audience when you're reading. Look up and look at different places because again, it helps bring the energy of the audience to you and the work that you're doing.
Yeah.
So, I mean, after Dallas's workshop, I've been in the workshop that I know Gordon from since 1990. I brought all those lessons that I share now back to everybody, and it really
Yeah.
helped a lot of people.
Yeah, it has. I'll say I have personally benefited. I took one of your poetry workshops a couple years ago at one of the Stoker cons,
Mhm.
and it was brilliant. And it changed everything I was writing. It pretty much reshaped my direction. So,
Oh,
yeah, you
makes
do
me
need to
happy.
send me the clubhouse information because I will probably be there this weekend. So,
I will. Yeah, it's it's a clubhouse, and it's not my club. Oh, here it is. I found it. Okay. Because I have a spreadsheet of all the things that I'm doing. So it's a clubhouse discussion that's being run by Jesse Holland,
okay.
who's the editor of um, Black Panther. It's 3 to 4 on Clubhouse. And I am friends with him, so I guess you can just do friends with him and then you can find it. And then I'm also doing a clubhouse with Brian Keene on the 5th.
Oh, nice.
Third is a clubhouse. April 3rd is the clubhouse with Jesse Holland from 3 to 4. And I'm going to spend 15 minutes just talking about tips on reading out loud. And then April 5th, I'm on a clubhouse with Brian Keene where I'm going to do like a 15-minute reading.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
That's
So.
awesome. Somebody, I think 3 or 4 times now, I've heard Clubhouse. I have no idea what it is, but I picture it's like Facebook. So I think I'm going to be finding out.
It's just voice. Now, do you have an invite? Because you can't just join it. You have
Oh,
to.
no. No, somebody was saying something about bringing me on Clubhouse, and I was kind of like, no idea what you're talking about. Moving on, we'll deal with that in a little bit. I think it was right in the middle of this issue. So,
Yeah. Well, I
yeah,
have
so I'll
an invite
explore
I can
that.
share with you.
Oh,
I mean,
okay.
my son gave me an invite to get in. You need an invite in order to
Right,
get.
like Google Plus back in the
Right.
day.
But it's so interesting because before I started in with this, I didn't know anything about it. And it's all
Yeah,
voice. First of all, you don't have to dress up. You don't have to put makeup on,
I love that.
and it's just voice.
Wow. Okay.
Visuals. It's a very different animal, but there's groups, and when you're in a person's clubhouse room, which is what you would go with Jesse's, he's got
Yeah.
one he does every Saturday called Writers Read Their Work. When you're in that room, you can just like, you'll see it, you can see your icon in it, but you're not like on stage to speak.
Right.
It's quite interesting.
Okay. Yeah, I have got to
Yeah,
check this out.
I like it.
What? Going back a little bit, Amanda Gorman,
Oh,
what is poetry's place for social justice? What is poetry's place for change? And I'm asking you because you're one of those people that is into love, not fear, positive change. This has to matter. We're doing these things because they matter. Where do you see poetry's role in that?
yeah. Well, I mean, I think poetry has always been part of social change and facing injustice. I mean, I was just talking to someone about the Harlem Renaissance, which was a long time ago, when jazz was born, the music of jazz.
Yeah.
And it was born out of the Black community because the musicians wanted to be able to just jam without the restrictions of what was expected of them as Black musicians, the kind of music they were expected to play. So jazz came out of this, wanting to just jam before and freedom. And it became very integral to Harlem Renaissance, very integral to what was not called Black Lives Matter back then, but was really because Black Lives Matter. The
Hmm.
restriction of society was terrible. And the first jazz poem was written by Langston Hughes.
Oh, wow. I
And
did
it was
not know that.
really, yeah, and it was very much touted. He created it in a sense, like when jazz was created, people were really like, wow, came to Harlem, to hear this new music. And he wrote the first jazz poem, which again, was just about being free, about being able to say your feelings, your reactions, your emotion, wanting it, it wasn't the words of equality, because to write poetry, to do art, is not always just telling people you should treat people nice. That's not a poem.
Right.
You should treat people nice is not a poem. But to write a poem that says that in some way, like the haiku you read, that haiku is saying we're all good and bad.
Hmm.
And you could say to someone, we're all good or bad. It's not a poem.
Right.
And they may not hear, they may not feel you. But if you write a poem that instills a reaction of um like if it brings something out of that person that makes them think that that was not good. In the conversation of poetry being connected to social injustice or the need for justice, it always has.
Hmm.
The earliest poetry, way before Harlem Renaissance, was a reflection on a reaction to something. So all poetry, all art, all paintings. And one of the things that I'm aware of, and it's not a rule for all poets, is that I do write very organically. So what that means is that I'm very sensitized to what's going on in the world. And being Black in America, you really don't have a choice. I mean, you can try to ignore it, which, is a good thing. Sometimes I just go out and don't want to even think about it. But then I go out and I'm reminded
Hmm.
because of how people look at me, how they treat me. I go into a store and there's jewelry, people are following me around. I mean, it's like I want to ignore it, but you're just not letting me, society.
Yeah.
So everything I write is not, I mean, I rarely sit down and say, I'm going to write this poem.
Hmm.
Morning Meal, that was made into a film by award-winning film by Jamal Hodge, who's also an amazing poet. That, and the title is Mourning Like Mourning Loss.
Hmm.
That poem was written as a reaction to seeing a news story about a child being lost and then found dead,
Oh,
and
wow.
how impossible that would be to process.
Yeah.
So all the poetry that I write, unless it's a poem that someone asked me for in a particular way, is my reaction in some emotional way. So yeah, it's I often think about art and poetry being like the conscious of society.
Yeah,
Like
I've thought
society
that
can
many times.
behave in this, society can put this front on about how it is.
Hmm.
But then the conscious that it's trying to ignore is where the art comes through.
Yeah,
So
yeah, the truths that
the
aren't
truth.
necessarily like the haiku that we keep talking about. So she should be super happy because we talk about that haiku a lot. I think there's the implications there that we each react to. To me, what she's saying to me is that it's okay. It's a lack of judgment. I can be good and bad, and that's okay. And to
Yep,
somebody else, it may be a completely different meaning, but that's the meaning I need from it. And that's why I think poetry and fiction, art in general, visual, music is so powerful because it's one truth from one person, but then it breaks up into these facets of truth that we all need that we can absorb.
absolutely. And I mean, I have heard back from people that some of my work may have made them uncomfortable, I guess, in some sense of it seemed too honest.
Hmm.
And I'm like, job done then. You're
Yeah,
welcome. You are welcome. Did my poem disturb you? You're welcome. I did a good job.
that's so awesome. I always say, if I can just be censored one day, I'll know I've done it right. If somebody protested, burned my book or something, I said something that mattered.
Yeah. So that's the purpose. And as I said, I've never written with that purpose. I've always written since I was a kid because that's how things come to me.
Mm,
I
yeah,
don't
which,
have that as a stand in that I'm doing,
mm,
even with my fiction. I do have Black characters in my fiction, but I also have Chinese. I also have, white. I have everything in there because I'm very curious about the world as a whole. But
mm,
also I know writers who write from, a very their culture point of view. Jeff Carroll, who I've known for many years, and the first time I met him is because he wrote this book called It Happened on Negro Mountain. I saw him at a convention with that book and I was like, okay, I need that book
yeah,
because that title was so entrancing to me.
yeah,
And a lot of his work is very much um, echoes the Black community and hip hop. And I love that about his work.
yeah,
I think whatever the voice is that comes to you that you're speaking through is the appropriate voice.
yeah.
For me, mine is just I don't decide; it just happens to me. So
Hmm. Yeah, which is where it's actually connecting to that truth. You're allowing that to happen, which I think is why it works so much.
yeah, I hope so. Well, I can't hope. I guess people
Well,
told me so.
all the Stokers, your house village would say, yeah, yeah, it's working.
Yeah, I mean, but there's a lot of people who write wonderful stuff that don't have one Stoker. I'm very cognizant of that concept.
I'm going to say you're talking about me right now.
Oh, really?
I don't have a Stoker yet, dang it.
Oh man. Ooh. No, I was
It's
not.
on my bucket list. It'll happen someday.
I love your work. I'll give you
Okay.
mine. You want one of mine? I got to go in and change the name to your name, though.
Yeah, all right, I'll do that. I just want to touch it.
Oh, I see you
I
got
think the
your Bram Stoker Award finalist on the wall back there. So
yeah,
there you go.
I'm just they're
One
just
step
so
at a time.
cute. I
One
think that's
step
where
at
I
a
fell in
time.
love with it. I think my first one, I came up and you know how you're allowed to kind of walk along and look at them close up, and I saw the little tentacles coming out the windows, and I was like, that's when it hit me. I want one. It's because of the tentacles.
And that is a perfectly good reason.
Yeah, they're adorable, and you get the little door that you can open up with your name in it. So, what more can you want? I mean, people spend a gob on those Hallmark houses. It's like way cooler, and it's free. Well, free.
Yeah, you have to go through
You got
the
to do a lot to
process.
get it, but
The process.
well, right now, at the time that we're filming this, we are in the middle of submission. So yeah, for 141, I get all my issues mixed up sometimes. We're reading for 141.
Yes.
Um, what else have you got coming up? That's going to come out in summer, but what is Linda Addison doing besides combing through tons of poetry for space and time?
Well, I talked about the fact that I have a story that's going to be coming out in this classic monsters
Which
anthologies,
I've
which is
heard so much
turning into
about lately.
it's really coming into a thing. I mean, it's got everybody in it, you
Yeah.
know. That's pretty cool. Um, and that's a story,
Hmm.
and it's going to be inspired by The Blob.
Oh,
But because
nice.
Blob is, which is one of my favorite movies, and they've made versions of it, and because The Blob is not in public domain, I can't actually write about The Blob. But I before I moved to Arizona, I lived in the Bronx, and there's always this thing where you say the Bronx, where it's like DA instead of THE.
Yeah.
So yeah, my story is going to, when it refers to the Blob, it's going to be the DA.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, it's gonna be jazzy. It'll be different because that's how I roll.
Hmm.
So I'm having fun with that, and that's gonna be a beautiful, beautiful anthology.
Yeah, I'm excited. I've been hearing about that everywhere. You cannot go online and be connected to the world and not hear about that anthology right now.
So that's a story that I have coming out, which is going to be awesome. As I said, the Weird Tales just came out with a poem of mine in it, which is that is kind of been on my bucket list forever because Weird Tales has been around for a very long time.
Yeah.
So to be in that is pretty amazing. And then I was just given permission, like yesterday, to say that I have poetry coming out in the magazine of fantasy and science fiction.
Oh, nice. Congratulations.
Thank you. So that is huge.
Yeah,
And
that is huge.
that's a big statement there. And then I have other things coming out that I can't really say until they tell me I can. So, but I'll be
The
teaching
vague voice in there.
I'll be teaching a workshop at StokerCon,
Yep.
and I'm also teaching a workshop on April 17th at the Tucson Poetry Festival.
Okay.
So, a lot of these kinds of things are on my website. I'm going to be, doing a presentation at some symposiums. Yeah, I have a thing with saying some words, and I tell
Oh,
people
yeah.
because I was very shy growing up. I know it's unimaginable, but true. And all I did was read everything, so I knew, and my vocabulary was huge. I used to win spelling bees all the time, but I didn't talk much.
Yeah. It's the pronunciation of it that messes you up because they're not spelled. I do the same thing.
So
So,
there's some words that really I stumble over. So
yeah.
anyway, I would say, if you're interested in any events that I'm at, just go to Linda Addison Poet, one word.com, and see
Yeah.
what's going on. But
Awesome. I will say there's a few people that I do not miss their workshops unless I just absolutely have to. You're one of those.
uh,
If I see your name anywhere, Jonathan Mayberry is another one with his act like a writer, business writer stuff. There are a few people I will not miss, and never miss one of Linda Addison's workshops if you could possibly. And I think I've taken two or three now, and it's always something that, like, I always, it's not like the same old thing where, and even maybe just different facets are coming through at different times. But I 100% think if you're serious about poetry, you need to take your classes.
thank you so much. I appreciate you saying that. And I love your work. So if I had any way of adding anything to it, I am deeply, deeply
Oh
appreciative.
yeah, well, it was a turning point. Like it was between it was Altars and Oubliettes actually, because I wrote that 2 or 3 years before I published it. I sent it to Marge Simon and
Mm,
said, "Give me an honest opinion. I don't like these. Do I not like them because, that self-judgment thing
yeah,
and this is really fine and I need to get over it and let them go, or do these really stink?" And she said, They kind of really stink, except for these, like she said it way nicer.
I know.
Marge is
She's
like, I did not
incredible.
say that.
No, Mars Simon is an incredible poet.
Oh,
She's
yeah.
I followed before I got published, and we're
Mhm.
friends. And
Yeah.
she's just a wonderful, wonderful person.
Yeah. And that feedback is so valuable to us because I wound up taking everything pretty much and going, okay, so my impression, I could trust that now because, yeah, these really did. I did not like them, so nobody else is going to like them. about the same time I think I took your workshop, and it was kind of like, oh, that's why I don't like them. Da 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 da. I can use this. I can use that. And I actually started doing form because of that workshop, and I cannot remember which one it was. That you did the cinquain. Am I even saying that right?
Fibonacci is
Yeah,
Sinkane.
cinquains, and yeah, and I'm terrible at
Fibonacci,
pronouncing
which
things.
is one of
Yeah,
my favorites because
we did a Fibonacci in your
yes,
class.
math. I love the math part of that.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'll be teaching that workshop at StokerCon.
yeah, I will be taking it again if I possibly can, because cannot get over that workshop. So yeah, it was altars and oubliettes. It was that workshop had such a profound impact on that because I reworked everything. And that was actually one of the things you had said is take a poem you don't like and rework it. And I did like all 40, 50 of them.
And
So
I love that collection. I
thank
love that.
you. Thank you. Well, you inspired it. Like you actually have more to do with it than you think. I should have put you on there as a co-author.
It'll be silly.
But
Silly.
what else would you like to say? Because I know we have to wrap it up because you've got a bunch of things to do today. Ever popular Miss Linda Addison.
Well, I would say just one more thing that I usually talk to with other writers that I do myself now, and I have done for many, many years, and that is writing from the deepest part of the most authentic part of yourself. And not necessarily thinking I'm writing from the deepest pain or the deepest joy. And now that I've written from that, I'm going to try to sell it. No, it's more to get in touch with that, to
Mm-hmm.
get in touch with those emotions, the positive and the negative. People talk about shadow. I've sat down and had long conversations with my shadows. The parts of me that I'm maybe not so proud of, don't want to see, don't want to look at, it shakes me. Because those are the parts that once you are made friends with it, or you're in touch with it, then you can write, and that gives your work the juice that's going to make people pay attention to it.
Yeah, that's probably how a demon became your friend. Yeah, I have that book on my shelf.
And that book is so funny because it's really done so well for me. But I always joke when I sell it, if somebody walks away and I think they got a good sense of humor, I'm like, oh, okay, just so you know, this book is entertaining and instructional. If you don't need to recognize that, that's good. And they always buy the book. They're like, oh, maybe I need it. I was like, yes, you do.
We all do.
So, well, it's
Awesome.
been a pleasure as
Yeah.
always. You and I have so much fun together. I miss seeing you at conventions, you and Ryan.
Yeah. Yeah. Hopefully this will pass. I have faith it'll pass
Well,
and we will all get on the other side. And
well,
I'm just going to say, I normally don't get drunk, but I'm getting so plastered and having so much fun. I'm going to get kicked out of the next StokerCon and they'll be like, don't ever come back. That was
I'm
too
just
much
trying to warn
party.
people ahead of time because I'm a hugger, right? I'm
Yeah.
just trying to warn the first 10 people that I actually see in person next year, I'm hoping.
Yeah.
And this year, I'm not flying anywhere this year. That if I hug you, I'm not sure I'll be able to let go. You might want to have somebody standing by to pry me away because I
Well,
haven't hugged anyone in so long.
I'm going to make it a point to be one of those first 10 people.
Yay!
Well, thank you so much for spending time with us today. Thanks for giving all the poets, all our hopeful poets, some tips on how to get past the Linda Addison guard and how all that wonderful poetry gets in the magazine.
Yeah,
100% you.
and never give it up.
Yeah.
Keep sending it out everywhere.